Greetings, fellow plebs. It's the overly opinionated Scots bastard back again. I've recently seen more disturbing trends in feminism. It seems to contradict itself more and more as time goes on. From the events that happened in Germany with the assault gangs and the Muslimist animals attacking these innocent young women on what should be a day of celebration in the West, to the way they support just basically pedophilia in some circles. SJW and feminism, the lines are blurred. They're basically the same ideologue now. But there are so many things that they don't understand about the history of feminism. Emily Pankhurst and the universal suffrage of women. The workers' rights, the fact that men, working class men for a very long period of time had as many rights as women. Perhaps more, perhaps less, depending on who you ask. But many misconceptions. One of the ones I'd like to go on today is the working rights. See, people have this idea that Europe has always existed in a situation where the man would go out to work and his dutifully abiding by wife would be at home waiting for him with the children and would serve no further purpose than to basically as a cum repository. Somebody to clean up after the messes. But this is a very, very inconsistent image of history. See, my country is famous for beginning industrialization. The Scots were nothing short of the second coming of the Greek intellect. We invented universal enlightenment, the idea of education for all. Presbyterianism, hard work with just rewards. And throughout history you realise that many women actually did work. Didn't have an option. No way a working class family could survive with children with just the man working. The idea that the woman stayed at home is very much from the middle and upper classes when the man could bring in such a sufficient wage that he could then fuel a household with no problem. But for the majority of people, the women worked. There was no option. Feminism doesn't seem to understand this. Their idea of history is middle class history, which, yes, women would stay for the majority of the time at home with the children. That was their place at the time during Victorian England and most of Western civilizations. Now, the idea that a man would go off to work and a woman stay at home past the 1900s is because there was a boom in economics. Trade was on high demand. After the World Wars, there was so much of the male population dead that anyone with a skill or a trade would be highly compensated and reimbursed for their time. So a working class man could justifiably bring home a decent wage packet to fuel his family for the woman having to work. But even among the 1800s, the woman was the head of the household. A man would not interfere with her affairs. This idea that men were chauvinist pigs back in the 18th century is far from the truth. Indeed, throughout much of Western civilization, there's been much admiration for women. When you look at the Celts and the Picts, where my country's heritage comes from, women weren't treated any differently. Yes, the men would go off to the wars because they were physically stronger and could wield a larger sword, but the women were left to defend the household, defend the village, defend the town. They weren't seen as weak. They weren't seen as some sort of subclass citizen. That's the upper ideologues of the middle classes where, once again, when you have an army, you can pay to fight your side. You don't have to worry about your women defending the keep. History is quite an odd thing because people tend to cherry pick the things that they like to see, the things that fit with them. Somebody like me who comes along with a great passion for history, regardless of the context of it, I don't believe in doing that. See, the problem with feminism after the age of the suffragettes just sort of deteriorated. They had nothing to fight for. So they started picking on minority rights, started picking on black rights, civil rights, LGBT. Why? I can understand, obviously, a human being, myself, I campaign for LGBT rights, wanting a better quality of life for those around him or her. But This idea that your political philosophy has to somehow stem into multiple fields is just unbearable. It's like conservatism then becoming environmentalism, becoming all these different things. You don't need to continue the same trend. Feminism should have died 20 years ago. It had no reason to exist forward. Some would argue that within the next 20 years you're going to see a rise of male universal suffrage again, because the way that men are treated in society as second-class citizens when it comes to reproductive rights and anything to do with the household. Let's examine Emily Pankhurst, one of the founding creators of suffrage for women, the precursor to feminism, if you will. She was middle class. She did not care about the working class women. She did not care about minorities. She wanted middle class women, proper Christian middle class women, to be able to have more rights. The suffragettes weren't concerned with the working classes, as is the case for most ideologues. It was a middle class ideologue. Its ideology was centred around the fact that middle class women who were educated, who were indeed very intellectually up there, should have the rights as men, and they should. And the suffragettes achieved that. I would argue, when saying that though, that it wasn't for the fact that men had to give up these powers to women. There was no reason for them to if they really had a problem with it. If you think about it, men control the military, they control politics. There was no reason to give any more power internally, because it's pointless. They gave it because political parties, as they do now, did back then, decided they wanted a larger vote. And the first party to give those votes over would gain a whole entire new threshold of voters. And it was after World War II that the vote for men and women became equal. Politically, at least in the UK, that's what happened. But right now, feminism is at a crossroads. It doesn't know what it is. It doesn't know what it's fighting for. There are so many different subjectivity matters in feminism that it no longer has an actual direction to go in at this stage. When you examine and look at just internet culture, places like Tumblr, and I'm a fan of Tumblr, I prefer to keep my blogs private, with exception to the ones I keep open. But places like Tumblr and Reddit, SJWs, they're nothing more than victimhood. That's what they are. They're just pure, unadulterated, uncomprehendable victimhood. How anyone can live in a mindset like that is beyond me. Feminism needs to find out what direction it wants to go in. Otherwise, the way it's currently going, there will be a revolt against feminism. Not just by men, not just by the right-winged like myself, but by women. Other women will decide that they no longer need feminism. Many have, which is why, in proportion to the amount of women in Western civilization, there are so few feminists across such a small, pocketed diversity range. What you'll find is these tend to be middle class, white women in feminism, or they'll tend to be the disenchanted, the people who they need something to latch onto, to feel part of, because otherwise what are they going to do? They're not special, they're not smart, they're not loved, they have no particular great amount of friends. Their personalities are, some of them's personalities are so demented and so disgusting and repugnant that nobody wants to know them. Nobody wants to have anything to do with them. And people wonder why feminism has such a victimhood complex. It's not because of feminism. There's nothing wrong with the actual term of feminism. I'm all for equal rights. What we have here is not feminism. It's a bunch of crybaby pansies deciding that everything has to be done for them because daddy didn't love them enough, or mummy was just a bit too fond of wine at the end of the day. I'll be making more videos of this. I I quite like ranting like this. I know the quality's not great, and obviously there's no images, nothing particularly strong, but it'll get better. If you like the video and you want to hear more Scottishness, then just give that like button or subscribe button on this website a little bit of a love. Do you get me, brother?